If a xenomorph were to infiltrate the International Space Station, the result would be nothing short of catastrophic. The ISS is a marvel of human engineering, a collaborative effort between multiple nations, floating delicately in low Earth orbit, supported by rigorous safety protocols and inhabited by highly trained astronauts. It is not designed to repel intrusions from highly aggressive, parasitic extraterrestrial species, especially one as deadly and intelligent as a xenomorph. The creature, first introduced in Ridley Scott's 1979 film Alien, is known for its unparalleled ability to adapt, hunt, and eliminate any form of resistance. If such a being were introduced into the fragile ecosystem of the ISS, the situation would spiral into a desperate fight for survival in a setting with no means of escape, minimal weaponry, and extreme vulnerability. The introduction of the xenomorph would likely be accidental, perhaps during a mission to retrieve a mysterious biological sample from a derelict satellite or an unexplained anomaly on a returning cargo capsule. Let us assume one such sample is retrieved and stored in a containment module, showing signs of unknown organic activity. Despite stringent quarantine procedures, some microscopic portion of the organism survives and begins to grow. The ISS, with its tightly enclosed space and low population, would seem like a poor hunting ground. But to a xenomorph, it is a perfect breeding ground: small, dark compartments, plentiful hiding spots, and warm-blooded hosts. Initially, the crew might notice strange anomalies, missing supplies, unexplained noises in the ventilation systems, or temporary communication failures. These could be brushed off as technical malfunctions, common in space operations. But soon, things would escalate. A crew member might go missing. At first, the others might assume a tragic accident, maybe a spacewalk gone wrong or a fatal injury in one of the more dangerous modules. However, the discovery of blood, acid burns on the metal bulkheads, and claw marks would dispel any illusions. Panic would set in, and the chain of command would be tested like never before. The biggest threat wouldn't just be the xenomorph itself, but the psychological unraveling of the crew. The astronauts aboard the ISS are scientists and engineers, trained to handle emergencies like oxygen loss, fire, or decompression. They are not trained soldiers or monster hunters. The mental strain of being hunted in an environment where a single puncture in the hull could lead to death by asphyxiation would be overwhelming. The xenomorph, with its ability to move through vents and remain unseen, would exploit this psychological pressure. Fear would be its weapon, long before claws or teeth were even necessary. Communication with Earth would be the first strategic concern. Once the alien is confirmed, the astronauts would be compelled to alert mission control. However, doing so risks causing worldwide panic. On the other hand, not doing so risks the loss of the entire station and the threat of the organism returning to Earth if a return module is launched. NASA and other agencies involved would have to make a grim decision, possibly even consider the destruction of the station to prevent the organism from reaching Earth. Containment becomes paramount. Efforts to capture or kill the xenomorph would be hindered by the station's design. There are no weapons aboard the ISS. Makeshift weapons might be fashioned from tools, piping, or lab equipment, but nothing capable of seriously harming a xenomorph. Its acid blood would present another massive problem. Any successful injury inflicted upon it could result in acid eating through metal panels, wires, or even hull integrity. One drop in the wrong place could depressurize a module or destroy critical life support systems. Suppose one of the astronauts is impregnated by a facehugger, the parasitic stage of the xenomorph life cycle. The clock begins ticking from that moment. It would be a moral and ethical crisis. Would the crew consider euthanizing a fellow astronaut to prevent the emergence of a chest burster? Could they even bring themselves to do such a thing? The trauma, ethical implications, and pressure of that decision alone would break most individuals. If the chest burster emerges, the already dire situation grows exponentially worse. One xenomorph is a nightmare. Two or more are a death sentence. Life support systems would become a battleground. The xenomorph's presence would force the crew to isolate sections of the station, perhaps even jettison some modules. This action, while necessary, would also reduce the station's functionality. Oxygen might become limited. Power may be rerouted inefficiently. Food supplies, already planned for strict daily rations, would dwindle quickly. The astronauts would not only be running from a monster, but also facing starvation, dehydration, or suffocation. Time becomes a finite resource. The xenomorph's intelligence cannot be underestimated. It learns. It stalks. It waits. In the claustrophobic corridors of the ISS, it would have the upper hand. The absence of gravity might affect it, but if the organism can adapt to zero gravity, as its biological tenacity suggests, it could become even more unpredictable. Imagine it crawling along the ceiling silently, while the crew floats helplessly in a pressurized module. Every movement becomes a potential ambush. Every corridor a potential trap. One of the more terrifying aspects is the realization that the ISS offers no true means of escape. The Soyuz capsules and other return vehicles could theoretically be used, but doing so risks bringing the organism to Earth. That is an unacceptable risk. Moreover, if the xenomorph damages those vehicles first, then the crew is truly stranded. Suicide missions would then become plausible options, crew members sacrificing themselves to jettison a module with the creature inside, hoping to trap it in the vacuum of space or send it hurtling into the atmosphere to burn up. But even those plans require time, coordination, and luck. The creature rarely allows any of those. Suppose the astronauts decide to evacuate and initiate a controlled re-entry of the ISS with the xenomorph inside. That requires flawless execution. A single malfunction or premature failure in the self-destruct or deorbit procedure could mean survival for the xenomorph, now free in Earth's orbit or atmosphere. If it somehow reaches the surface, through debris or a malfunctioning escape pod, the consequences would be apocalyptic. Earth's ecosystem would provide an unlimited breeding ground. Civilization would be facing extinction. On the more speculative side, if a xenomorph were to successfully inhabit the ISS and begin laying eggs, the biological implications would be immense. The ISS contains numerous experimental labs, some with biological samples, radiation exposure tests, and gene editing tools. If the xenomorph or its larvae were to interact with these environments, rapid evolution or mutation could occur. Hybrid creatures with even more horrifying adaptations might emerge. Scientists have often theorized that the creature's DNA is highly reactive, capable of absorbing genetic traits from hosts. In a lab-rich environment, the results could be disastrous. Meanwhile, back on Earth, agencies would be monitoring every signal, every heartbeat, every camera feed, assuming the xenomorph hasn't destroyed them all. Politicians would debate the moral implications of rescue versus destruction. Families of astronauts would beg for intervention. Scientists would argue over the potential of studying the organism versus exterminating it. The debate would rage as lives continue to be lost in orbit. By the time a consensus is reached, it might already be too late. One possible scenario would involve the last surviving astronaut, alone, wounded, and desperate, choosing to lure the creature into an escape pod. Once inside, they might set a course for deep space, effectively sacrificing themselves to take the xenomorph as far from Earth as possible. It would be a hero's end, echoing Ripley's sacrifice in Alien 3. But again, success would hinge on timing, precision, and whether the creature takes the bait. The tension of that moment, the beep of the countdown, the creature approaching, the cold silence of space outside, would be overwhelming. Even in death, the xenomorph's influence might remain. Debris from the destroyed ISS could fall to Earth, contaminated with traces of the creature's biology. Even burnt remains might contain spores or microscopic cells capable of regrowth. The fight for containment would not end with the explosion. It would continue on Earth, in labs, in secret. Some factions might even seek to weaponize the creature, storing samples in underground bunkers, studying it in black site laboratories. The cycle would begin again, as it always does when curiosity outweighs caution. The presence of a xenomorph on the ISS is not just a science fiction horror scenario. It is a test of humanity's limits. It is a story about fear and isolation, about the clash between science and survival, and the price of progress when faced with forces beyond comprehension. It is a reminder that space, for all its wonder and discovery, is still a realm of infinite dangers. And if we are not prepared mentally, ethically, and scientifically, then we are as vulnerable as ever, floating in the void, one disaster away from extinction. In conclusion, the Xenomorph's infiltration of the ISS would result in a chilling blend of biological horror and existential dread. The confined space, the absence of weapons, and the delicate nature of the station itself all tip the scales in favor of the monster. It is a terrifying thought experiment, not only because of the danger posed by the alien, but also because of the reflection it forces upon humanity. Our hubris, our bravery, our fear, and our resilience when faced with the unknown. If such a nightmare were ever to become reality, our best hope would lie not in defeating the creature, but in ensuring it never reaches Earth, even if that means sacrificing everything in the cold silence of space.